Hey everyone, I'm here with Rachel Horne, seasoned leader and director of revenue operations with a passion for helping organizations achieve alignment, operational excellence, and strategic execution. With a career spanning multiple leadership roles in operations, revenue, and business strategy, Rachel has honed the ability to work across all levels of an organization, from departmental teams to executive leadership. She specializes in process reengineering, building scalable strategies, and driving results through effective execution, helping companies optimize performance and achieve measurable growth. Her experience spans innovative technology platforms, corporate real estate, and high-impact business operations, making her a trusted advisor for leaders looking to transform how their organizations operate. So we're going to talk RevOps today. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. That was a mouthful.
I know AI did a good job with your summary.
Good job.
So we were talking a little bit about RevOps and business operations and how you believe there should be an intersection and alignment or not, and how critical it's been for growth. Can you talk a little bit about how we get everyone working together instead of being siloed, which is something that happens often, right?
Yeah, I wish there was a magic wand to fix that. But I mean, if you look from the BizOps perspective plus the RevOps perspective, RevOps I think of as it's the company's revenue generating engine, right? Which is a really important piece of the company. But business ops is about the company as a whole. I think it's too common for people to think the only way you grow, it's you got to sell. But what about all the pieces behind it, right? You're selling a product. You're marketing a product. There's a lot of teams that come together to do this. So yes, you can have a really fantastic go-to-market strategy, but you've got to get the business aligned behind it. And that alignment, it's what creates that engine to operate. So if you think of the misalignment side, this comes from lots of different things, right? Not one source of truth, different reporting engines, reporting on the same metric, but having different definitions. When you're not aligned, it's just chaos for all of the teams. You'll get you waste the time of your analysts, for example, looking at multiple different sources for the same number to figure out what's broken and what's wrong. And all the time you spend doing that, you're not making decisions about the company. You're not moving the needle along. You're still trying to figure out just even how to understand the business. So I think that's where RevOps really can help, right? We're thinking about the revenue, we're reporting on it, we're analyzing it regularly. We're also trying to make it predictable. And that just rolls into the overall strategy of the business.
So maybe give us some examples for our listeners as well. What KPIs, metrics, analytics do you feel for, let's say, a SaaS company, just generic, what are important to be tracking that may not be tracked right now? Because obviously top line revenue, that's just of course we're looking at that, but what other metrics do you find important that you're like often overlooked by people in RevOps or, in the function?
Yeah, I do find one that not necessarily gets forgotten, but not focused on as much that is becoming very important now is around your retention metrics, right? It's easier to make more money from a customer you have today than to close new business. So we focus on this net new revenue target, but they're, depending on what your product is, of course, and how big your market is, there's so much potential sitting there with your customer base. And more importantly, even if you can't expand, the churn of that customer costs money, right? It's a step backward from the number you're trying to work toward. I think that's a big one, and it's really the metrics behind it. So health scoring, I've seen done differently at so many different companies. I've seen it prioritized and not. It's certainly one of those things that you do need to get right. And I don't think it's ever done, right? You might have 10 usage points. How are your customers using it? What features are they using? How many of the users are logging in at what basis? Like those all paint a picture, but it takes a long time to figure out what the right numbers are. And then on top of that, what's the threshold? But it's using that to be more proactive at identifying risk and churn before churn is even a question. But also you can use that to identify white space. So it kind of goes both ways. I think that's a big one. And again, getting it right is really hard. It's something, I've done recently and building these proactive notifications for CSMs and account managers to go out and have the conversations with their customers before they're frustrated with the product. Pipe gen, it depends on how you're measuring it. I think that one gets lost a little bit as well of, what multiple do you have to have? you got to work all the way back. So you might say, this is my revenue target, but you got to rewind and go back to, well, how do you get there? And how much of our pipe is marketing generated versus outbound and prospecting? And what's that percent? And then take that back and take that back. I think measuring your pipe and making sure that you're planning for it in the right way is also something that often gets forgotten or oversimplified. And here's our target, and we're just going to triple our headcount to get there. It's not that
Yeah.
easy.
Well, we hear a lot about this in terms of quotas where, I think the number were something like 80% or something of sales reps were not even hitting quota. And it was a very high number. It was way higher than anyone would have thought it would be. And so the quota numbers, are they just not realistic that people are putting out there? Is it just that we're trying to hit a, 500,000 revenue per employee number or something? And everyone's just trying to find a way to massage the numbers to make it look good. It's like,
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of different scenarios with this, and it just seems like unrealistic expectations, maybe, or if no one's able to hit quota, then the quota is not correct, right? To me, it's like you want to have incentives in place where people can actually hit top bonus, and if no one in the company is hitting bonus or no one's hit,
Yeah.
then what's the point? You're unattainable goals, right? We're always talking about SMART goals in business, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about this whole revenue per employee versus quota attainment?
Yeah, I think this ties back to, RevOps and business ops being aligned as well, right? We've got data from the past years that we'll start with, and what's our conversion rate, and all of those things can impact how we look at the next year. But this is a big one. If RevOps and the go-to-market side are not aligned with the business ops goals, you're going to have a problem immediately, right? It is our responsibility in RevOps to push back if it's unrealistic and use the data that we have. It's okay to have a stretch goal. You should have a stretch goal. But if you work it backward and it's impossible for a rep to hit, we're not setting anybody up for success. One, we're setting goals we're not going to hit. Two, it wrecks your culture when nobody is succeeding. And it's hard to action on that too. If nobody's hitting their numbers, what are we measuring and how are we learning where success comes from or not? So I think it is pretty common to just take that number of, the board wants us to double next year. Okay, great. That's this revenue target. We've got 10 sellers. Let's divide it by 10. Obviously a little bit more granular if you're going by segment, but that's not the way you set a quota, right? So I think that's a common mistake that is made, especially in startups that are just
Do
figuring out how
more
to
with
do
less.
this. Yeah, and quotas are super complicated depending on the business you're in, right? If you're doing it by segment or territory or industry, like there's just levels of complexity that go on top of it. But it's a really important exercise to get right. Companies that do this really well start at least a quarter before the end of the year to figure that out and work with their finance team and work with HR and work with industry standards and all of that stuff to build it properly. But I think a lot of companies get it wrong.
No, I can appreciate that, and you're right. The number of, we need 5 million in sales next year. Okay, there's 10 people, so you guys all have to hit 500. That's it, and or you're fired, right? And that's usually the dark leadership we see out there, where realistically maybe the number was 300 per employee, and you maybe need to hire a couple more, because it's not only that, but I remember seeing, and this is across industries, where if you have too much volume for a given, let's say, account rep, the service sales actually suffer. So maybe you're going to get more total revenue through the door, but the dollar per customer, the customer ticket, let's say, is much less, because they don't have the time to spend for upselling. They can't do value add. They're just trying to push through pipe, because it's like, I just need to hit my number. I'm not going to do value add. I can't go back and add on extra users or whatever they may want to be doing.
Mhm.
So you're not getting that high level of service either. And so that also hurts your brand and things like that, right?
Yeah, it translates all the way down to it's easy to think it stops with sales closed a bad deal, but you've got an implementation team inheriting that to then go build on something that was not set up for success from the beginning. And if you get through that and salvage it a little bit, it's still going over to a customer success manager that's going to manage that relationship, and they probably churn out at the end of all of it. So there's that side too. And there's certainly a sweet spot between capacity planning and setting your OKRs and all of that. You don't want to set a goal and then say, let's hire everybody for it right now if the product we're selling is 6 months out. So that's the BizOps alignment that you
Yeah.
have to have of, okay, how are we going to make that number? Is it on new features? Is it on partnerships? Is it on, and then make sure those things are built. And I think that's part of it. It's not that you set an unrealistic target. It's that you set an ambitious target with no real actionable plan to support that. And that's where you end up with too many reps or too much volume coming in, but nothing to do with it, or right, any of those outcomes.
Yeah. So I guess, having that communication between the different teams, like product, sales, and marketing, and so on, like you need to have those weekly meetings, or how do you typically like to manage that when you're trying to create alignment?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the structure of your org. A couple companies ago, I also managed a customer success and implementation directly. And I found the weekly leadership meetings are invaluable when you sit in those seats. I think people may take it for granted how important it can be for a lot of functions. And this might be partly to like an ops mindset. We never stop thinking about 12 steps ahead, which is a blessing and a curse. But sitting in those meetings, if you're being handed as a sales leader, for example, this aggressive target, and you're sitting in these meetings and you're hearing what products working on, what's on the roadmap, and they're not matching up, like this is your opportunity to say, we've got to find a better way to get there. Or is there a way we can speed this up? Or we don't have the team to support that. Let's now work with P&C or HR to get there. That's your opportunity to have the heads of each area of the business sit together and fill in those blanks. I've been at companies that only do it monthly. I think that's a huge miss, especially in a startup or a young company. You're moving so quickly that week to week it is important, right? And we do still have to pivot sometimes, and we can have the tightest goals we want to have, and we might need to pivot. And you've got all of the right people at the table to just high level figure out what to do. I think that's so important, and to run them right. I've been in really good ones, and I've been in ones where it's like we're just getting together to say, hey, it's going well, and give your high level update of the success of your team. It's good to share that, but I think it's more important to talk about the challenges and the things you're working through with those people, because they can help. Or you never know what, something you're working on you didn't even consider is going to impact that team. Now they have the opportunity to raise their hand and figure out how to collaborate.
That's also, I would say, a big part of like having the culture where people feel safe to be able to share that product may not be ready for this month for your launch, or
Yeah.
because everyone wants to play the blame game, right? They'll just say, well, they'll put, in other places where there's low safety, the product people may just not even say something because they don't, like, I'll just blame sales. They didn't sell it, too bad. Or try to cover it up, or, I've seen that a lot in corporations where it becomes very a little knife fight in the telephone booth, like where everyone's trying to run
Yeah.
for cover. So I guess if you have that culture where people are safe to raise their hand and say, yes, this is happening, or you need to adjust, they can even advocate for you with your goals and be like, no, that's a little too ambitious because we're going to be delayed by 2 weeks, and all that kind of collaboration. So if you're able to achieve that, that's great.
Yeah, you're right. Culture it's a big piece in there. It's also about the people sitting at the table,
Yeah.
right? There's so many different parts of this that could not work out, even as hard as you try. Um, the company I'm at, NAC, right now, we have one of our core values is transparency. And the whole point is we all learn from each other, good and bad. But more importantly, if we make a mistake or something happens or something's delayed and we share that with the team, we can work together to resolve it. It takes time to really make people believe that it's a safe space to do that. I also do think it comes down to the leaders of each department. It's our job to make sure that our team feels comfortable raising their hands, because we don't see everything either, right? We need our people in the boots on the ground to tell us what's going on sometimes. So it's a big culture piece, but I think if all the leaders band together and push it that way, it starts to become easier as you see other people do it, right? Like you demonstrate it. If I'll fall on my sword any day, if it'll help us move faster to get through something. So you have to see other people do it too. I think it's important for leaders to do it, especially in front of teams. And then they start to realize, okay, look at the outcome of that. It may not have been a great experience, but the team band together and we found a way out.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I agree with the transparency piece. It's actually one of our core values too with our company. So yeah, it seems counterintuitive to some people that, oh, you're maybe being too open with certain things but I think in the long run, it's a trust builder, immediate trust builder for people when they see that level of vulnerability maybe and being open to discuss things. And if you're able to have those hard conversations, when it's not so bad, when it does get bad, then it's a little easier to top the really hard ones. So can appreciate that. But part of making decisions is also having good data. And I know you love analytics, right? So how do you use data? What are your from real estate now to SaaS, how you sort of manage your dashboards and power. Are you a Power BI wizard? Is that
Yeah, it's funny you go one company to another and I've seen it all for sure. I mean, even on the point of data, it's that alignment that we talked about before, the source of truth. It's getting harder and harder today to have that because there's so many different tools in people's stack and they're all starting to overlap, right? To forecast it in Salesforce only, and then Clary came around and they were way better. So now you're in Clary, but Gong is doing it in platform, and that those analytics can help the rest of the cycle. So now you're in Gong. Now Outreach is doing it. So I will say it's getting harder because we have so much more data than we've ever had, but we have so many platforms that are offering it up to us in one way or another. So, take that with a grain of salt that it is really tough. The other piece is preference. And, your leadership team might prefer to be in one platform, take Tableau, Power BI, whatever it is. But then your day-to-day users are using a dashboard in Salesforce or, HubSpot or whatever you're using. So that's the piece where I think it's really important that even if maybe you do have two places that people prefer to look, it's governed by one team. I think that's where RevOps is really important is having those analytical seats sit inside of RevOps or at least very close to RevOps, depending on your org, right? You might have marketing separate or within. Those two analysts are really important. If they govern it, it's okay if you have two sources because they're the ones building the foundation of it. They're the ones auditing it. But in a perfect world, you're all looking at the same thing. And then it's what you're looking at. So I think, with all with all the tech coming out, forecasting and pipeline management is getting more predictive. And there's so much data that can, signal to how this deal is going to unfold throughout the period or where are we seeing shifts going forward. I think the data that we're getting from tools like that is so important right now and really, really cool. Like trend analysis, for example, that used to be manual, right? Your
yeah.
analysts would export a ton of data with timestamps from your CRM and spend weeks putting it together and try to paint a picture, and by then your data is old. Now you've got tools that are showing you those trends and can summarize it and say, it looks like you're losing a lot of deals at this stage after these conversations or these number of touch points, or you're missing these important, whatever your sales methodology is, data points. And it's not up to the rep to figure out what they missed anymore. We've got systems that will say, here's what's happening. I think that data is becoming incredibly useful, but a lot easier to get.
And maybe faster feedback cycles then with pipeline and whatnot. Like instead of having to wait for the quarterly report to pull out or something, you're able to almost real time coach, right?
Well, it makes too, like when you're forecasting, and again, it's going back to business ops. It's not just about what our sales leader thinks is happening. There's so many other puts and takes. I like to call it the RevOps call, which I'm sure not all sales leaders would love. But there's the sales view of here's what's in our pipeline that I've committed and I feel good about. And then I always have my RevOps view of maybe we're a little bit more reserved, but we have the data historically, how many deals do we push into the next quarter at the very end? We've got all of the win rates and understanding that, but we see that plus we see what's going on in like the late stage of procurement and legal and things like that. So, but it makes it easier to paint that picture if somebody wants to see both rather than us running those separately. The other data points kind of goes back to the CS topic of retention and expansion. There's so many cool tools out there to track product usage now and help you slice and dice it in a million different ways. Um, and I think, that stuff is so important if you get it right. Right now, we notify people when risk drops, right? But It's what do you do next? And incorporating a playbook into it based on the data points, right? Because maybe they dropped because of this data point, but they're still strong over here. We still want to focus on it. We want to send them some resources or put them in a sequence with this webinar coming up or whatever it is. One, you can automate on that. But two, we've got all of those data points in a usable way.
Nice.
Push it into whatever platform you prefer, right?
No, that's great because the friction in the product, it sometimes takes a while to figure out what exactly is causing it. Is a, user issue? Is it UI, UX? I mean, there's all sorts of different things to consider.
Yeah.
We're actually working with a couple startups right now with this exact kind of thing, or product development, and thankfully, like you mentioned, they were smart enough to bring in the whole team, marketing, product, sales, to work together
Mhm.
rather than stagger the hires for it. So that's a good starting point when you have that mindset of working together and iterating on product as a team, right?
Yeah.
That's
I think
huge.
it's the combo of the data too.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it's not like health score is new to anybody. It's just how it was done before. I think it was, this is product data. So product is looking at it and product is thinking about it from this very specific viewpoint because that's how they think and that's how they should think. And then you've got sales data over here and pipeline data over here, not intersecting. It's layering them over top of each other. I'm a big Gong lover. Gong is launching all of these theme spotters and things like that, but it's taking from your first conversations recorded to your emails going back and forth to your closed one opportunity to your EBRs. All that data is in one place. So when we start
yeah,
to lose deals or churn out customers, we actually have points that have been collected on why. And now we can say, okay, it's not, product might see usage drop, but why? It doesn't always tell you that, but then you have these conversations and all of the data from those with your CSMs and anybody talking to the customer, marketing, whoever, and you layer those together. And now you've got a pretty good story and something that's actionable. So I think that's fairly new as we like tools have been very siloed of this is for product and it's product data.
yeah.
This is for sales and it's sales data, but truly you guys have to talk to each other and the systems need to talk to each other.
No, it makes sense. And I mean, from a logical point of view, I mean, ideally, it's just everything's available. But I guess when you're used to the siloed thinking, it's hard to change that mindset, right? I know also there's just so much change happening, I think, in general with the new technology. And one of them, of course, is AI. I know NAC is also bringing it in to your company as well. How would you say, the trends you're seeing, where do you see yourself and your team using AI as part of your workflow? And where do you see it in terms of like go to market, like in general,
Yeah.
moving forward? Because there's so much stuff out there. I think there's over 3,000 plus AI startups right now doing every trick in the book you can think of, right?
Yeah, and it is changing really quickly. I mean, if you asked me my pitch for NAC 2 weeks ago, I would have said we're a no-code email landing page builder. And now we're saying we are revolutionizing the campaign creation process, right? We're AI first. To paint the picture of how fast it changes is, a year ago, it was cool that AI could suggest a subject line for your email. And here we are saying, let's build all of it with AI. Just tell us what you want, prompt it, get what you need. So I think it's a really cool time for RevOps, especially, and whether that's marketing, sales, BD, implementation support, all the people interacting with customers. I think it's the first time that RevOps is really shifting from being a reactive supporting function to a proactive strategic one. And there's so much to do. I think there's some trends that will go away. We're going to learn a lot from, right? So I'm sure you get cold calls all the time and a lot of them are not people. I'll be curious to see how that lands, right? There's some pieces of it that's like cold calls are tough. They have very low conversion rates. It's a human spending a lot of time doing it. Should we invest in it? Works for some people, or doesn't for others. If I pick up the phone and it's not even a real person, I'm hanging up. But there are so many use cases that make sense. The heavy administrative tasks that even a sales rep does on a day to day, right? They come off a call, they write up a summary email with next steps. wait, they're going to a back-to-back call. They didn't have time to do it. Now they're trying to remember what they talked about. Like those are very basic things, but they make a big difference, right? Here's your recording. Here's your summary. Send it out to your customer. Great. Schedule the next task. Great. But even in the BDR function, like the outbound motion, there's so much that can be automated on signals on, right? Like we've got so much data. Think about the things that a BDR does in a day-to-day, like trying to book a meeting.
Yeah.
Well, Chili Piper can do that for you, right? We don't need a human to reach out to try to do it if they already asked to talk to us. Automate that. Automate your sequences, right? Like lots of tools that track movement of your champions. We don't need a human to send the email to say congrats on your new job. That's automated through a sequence. So there's a lot of those administrative pieces, the research side. I don't think those are going anywhere. I think those are the first things to spend time. They're quick wins and they save a lot of money. And then you free up the time of your valuable resources to do more important things like relationship building. I think those are the big ones. And then, I mean, every tool in, I think, everyone's stack is launching endless things. I think that's the tough one, is like the consolidation play versus the new shiny tool. I think half of these companies will disappear in a few years because we're all trying to do the same thing. But the consolidation play is like, selfishly, I love from a RevOps view because it's less systems to manage and cleaner data. I don't know.
Makes
I don't know if
sense.
it's that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of AI garbage out there as well, which I've seen, and a lot of companies trying to like charge for things you can do with ChatGPT already, and they're trying to monetize it, which I think is just kind of, scammy kind of stuff. But there is some really good tools out there. You're right, and I think the idea of admin tasks, workflows, things that were repetitive and boring, and no one liked doing them anyways. So I'm more than happy to automate that. And then maximizing face time with customers and actual interactions, building those relationships. That's where the money is, right? So uh, putting your efforts to that totally makes sense. So I know that you've also built a lot of teams, and hiring is definitely part of what you've done. So what can you tell us about lessons you've learned in terms of, building your teams? Hiring salespeople is always hard as well, right? So what have you learned that way?
I've definitely made some great hires and I have learned a lot along the way. I'd say early in my career, ops is tough. Like I've sat in the sales ops role, the CS ops role, business ops role. Like it's tough because you get very different types of people. But I would say for ops specifically, one of the things I've learned is I really care about who the person is, what their characteristics are above just experience. Some of the strongest ops people I've hired have come from a function that we support. My CS ops manager right now was a CSM before. And it's such invaluable experience because you've lived it and seen it and felt the pain, that is more important to me than someone that's worn just an ops hat for 5 years. Not to say that person can also be great, but this is where I have so many conversations because I really want to understand the person. I think in how fast, especially now that ops roles are developing, companies are changing, it's more important that you have the appetite to keep learning, pivot, switch platforms, learn what's coming out, stay on top of it, get excited. I think that appetite is almost more important than your experience because it's all changing, right? You might be the master of 5 different platforms, and in 2 years, it's not about the platform. It's about the process that you built behind it, and then you enabled people with that platform. So I think that mindset is super important. And I've definitely hired the perfect, analysts, for example, like the perfect resume of the titles and the companies and the experience, but it's been the wrong person. I like to build teams of people that are very similar, but they're hungry and they're excited and they're collaborative and they like chaos, because realistically, if it's a smooth day in ops, something else is wrong. So I think that's a tough one to learn, because it's way easier to just look for someone with the perfect resume. But I do think the personality is super important for building your team. Sales is tough too. Some of the best young salespeople I've hired, this is funny, but came from like the bar industry.
Totally can relate to that.
Right? It's a funny thing because I look at the resume and go, oh, awesome, bartender. They haven't sold before, but they've got the charisma and, so Obviously, you have to find a combination because there's still a side of sales that is analytical and you're organized and process oriented for sure, but you also just have to have that quality that a lot of people don't have. But it is tough. And it depends on the industry you're in and what you're selling too, right? If it's fully technical and you don't have sales engineers to support those people, then you are looking for a very specific skill set versus if you've got all of the right people and you really need a relationship person, then you're looking for a personality type, not an experience. So it definitely goes different ways. But I find hiring for sales is fun. You always have fun interviews with salespeople.
Well, I think that's important because, personality behaviors, you can't change that too much with people. You can coach up a good person to be great, but some people it's behavioral, it's that level of curiosity and ops as you were talking about, right? That level of, and for bartenders, I think what it is for them is they're used to high pressure. If you're in a bar and there's 30 people asking for drinks and they're drunk and they're upset, oh, give me where's my bartender? You're used to that hustle mindset of chaos sort of, and you just gotta put out the fires and you gotta work quickly. So that really translate into I have a quota to hit this month and I got to make a certain amount of calls and book so many meetings and so on. Like, and of course the people skills of making people at ease very quickly. That's literally a bartender, right? You think about it.
Part therapist.
We've seen some really good hires, and for my teams as well, I've hired a lot of people in hospitality before, and it seems to work out for specific positions like any kind of account rep, sales rep type position for sure. So
Yeah.
it's funny how that's a thing. It's actually
Yeah.
you tell people we want to be a salesperson later in university, work at a bar first, and you may have a chance.
Yeah. 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 Don't go to school. Just go bartend. You
No,
heard
that's
it here
great.
first.
And so for yourself too, though, you've had a lot of learnings along the way. For let's say someone listening right now and they're an operations manager and they want to get to the highest level, what kind of advice would you be able to give them in terms of like tools they need to learn, skill sets they need to learn, career trajectory? Like what positions do you think what seats should they try to get into for some experience? Because
Yeah.
you can't just go from ops manager to CRO or something, right?
I wish. Yeah, no, good question. And you could even take it one step further. I have a lot of conversations with sales reps and CSMs looking to learn how to get into ops. And I think it's a misconception a lot of people have that you have to start in ops to be an ops. I don't think anyone starts in ops. I started in finance and was frustrated of, how poor the process was and somehow made it over to ops. So I think that's the first thing is it's really about, what do you care about? Maybe what frustrates you. I think that helps me. What frustrates me is usually what I work on first. But then once you're in that seat, there are a lot of ways to go company to company, your interests, you could branch off into a specific area and stay in that area. It could be like the finance office, but sitting on the ops side. But I think moving from that manager seat up, it's the big piece is the strategic mindset and also just how to work relationships. The higher up you get, the more complicated it is to manage a team. One, you've got to have the right team under you to be successful, but there is no shortage of asks for ops. It never ends. We'll never be caught up. We have a backlog that we will die with. So prioritizing is super important, but it's also managing the people that are making those decisions above you. And that comes at each level, right? You might be a team lead and you're learning to manage your manager and your manager's learning to manage their director and so on and so forth. We're all figuring that out. But I think the really important skill set to develop is that. How do you challenge somebody in of authority? It takes a while to do this, but I don't see necessarily someone's title from a perspective. Of course, there's a time and a place to talk to someone, but from a functional perspective, if you're the head of your department, you know the most about that department in that room, right? If someone knows more than you, then that's not good from the head seat. In the functions below you, yeah, my analyst should be a better analyst than me. But you've got to have that confidence to challenge those things, right? This might be the goal and you think this is the goal, but if you want to get here, I need to stop doing this and I need you to approve that. You have to be comfortable having those conversations. If you're not, your team is just going to be crushed, right? There's too much work to do. But on the flip side, I think people forget that a lot of people see that challenging and asking those questions in a good way, right? It shows that you can think strategically. It shows that, you know enough to say, here's what we should do. It shows that you can lead a team. And even if you're not in that role yet, start to do that. Ask those questions. Challenge the people around you to learn more and see if there's other ways to do things and share your ideas. Sitting quiet is not going to help, right? We have to be loud and make some noise. The only other thing I would say is join peer groups, find networks, go to events, and talk to other people in these roles. I have learned the most from just other people in RevOps. One, because there's so much to do and so much to learn that you're never going to be on top of it by yourself. So talk to somebody else and maybe they're learning this and you're learning this and now you can share it. Now you know two things. Because I don't think there's a perfect path, but you can learn so much from other people and their experiences. There's so many resources out there. If you're a Salesforce person, there's like 20 Slack channels you can join with other professionals. Like there's lots of ways to learn more. That's the stay curious piece. And the more you learn, the more you're going to be comfortable talking to levels above you about what you're learning. And that's just going to start to paint that kind of strategic picture. And people want that.
That makes sense and good advice in terms of like building a network and building a support structure around your career because no one has all the answers, right? And I guess also no one's trajectory in their career is always just linear, like you move up, and sometimes making a lateral move can be helpful too. We've seen that with some executives where they're stuck in a director position or a VP position. They're trying to get to the next level. And then we tell them, well, instead of trying to get into enterprise right now, why don't you take a sidestep to a smaller company than what you're at, but getting a higher title to get that experience in the lead role, right?
Right.
So you're going from a company that's 1,000 people down to 250, but now you're the number one person. Now you're getting a little different experience that you can put on your resume, right? And now you get that title that you've wanted, and now you can start to move up by headcount size or revenue size and so on until you can get into enterprise, right? So there's a lot of ways to get where you want to go. Can appreciate that and learning along the way, being curious always, right? So
Yeah.
that's great. What lessons learned though? I mean, what if you could go back, to the beginning of your career and you've seen you've made some mistakes or some things you should have done a little bit differently, let's say, what would you say is something you would have altered maybe a little bit?
So many. That's a tough one.
I know.
I still
No
continue.
pressure. It's not an interview,
No, right. Don't tell anybody. I'm still learning. Every
Yeah.
company is different. Every executive team is different. The characters you work with are different. So, I still make mistakes. I think one that's easier to say, but significantly harder to do is, it's business. It's not personal. Um, I speak as if all ops people are the same people, but I do think most of us think the same way. And we're super passionate people. That's the only way we would survive what we do. It's chaos, it's hard work, it's long hours, but we are passionate. So, when we put all of our time and energy into something and then it gets crushed later on, which does happen, it's hard to not take it personally. I'm still learning to flex that muscle, right? It doesn't go away, especially if you're a passionate manager. I love managing people. I love my teams. I'm a little mama bear sometimes with my teams, but you've got to separate those two things. And sometimes stopping something you've worked really hard on is the best thing for the company, and you just got to jump into the next thing. So, that's one piece, and I've made that mistake many times. It's too easy to get caught up in how much you care about something. The other piece is forgetting to this, and this is a big one too. And actually, I was speaking with someone at one of the investment portfolios we've worked with, and gave me fantastic advice. We move really fast. I still do this. Sometimes it's like if you're a sales rep and you sit down with an engineer and you ask them what they're building. You don't understand. There's no way. You're not going to understand what they're saying. It's not what you do. Sometimes when I explain something, I do it so quickly and I do it in a way that I assume everyone knows what I'm saying. And it's too easy to get for that to get lost in the conversation, which just trickles down into not understanding what you agreed to or not being aligned later on or so on and so forth. Learning to take a step back and think about who you're communicating to and find a way to do it right and take a minute to explain it, I think is super important. And again, when we're super busy, we all make the mistake. But one piece on top of that is just the listening. I think RevOps specifically are often viewed as no's. We say no a lot. I try to say not now instead of no. But even when doing that, taking the time to listen to what the person is asking and ask some questions. Even if you think you understand, right? My brain might go straight to, yeah, if we do that, everything breaks. So it's a no. Why are you trying to do this? What root problem are we solving? Because maybe there's a different way to do it. I think that has saved me a ton of hours of wasted projects, has also given a little bit more trust back to the person asking, right? They're going to stop coming to you with ideas if you always say no. Make them feel good about what they're thinking about. That's the right thing you want your leaders to do. You want your sales leader to come to you and share problems, right? That's how we're going to improve together. But you got to remember that they're people and they put thought into this too. So that's a mistake I've made many times, is just jumping straight to this will break. No, we can't do it. Instead of trying to really understand, what are you trying to do? Okay, maybe we should do that. And we'll go talk to the other teams about it. That's a big one. And that's
So
hard to do.
it sounds like stress management a little bit as well, because if you're like, and I've seen this a lot in ops with people, if you're stressed, it's like you're just adding this onto the pile. It's like that mentality of like I'm at my limit, and now you're asking for extra. It's like no. So then I totally get what you're saying, where the initial knee jerk reaction is no, 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 just no. We can't. We got our projects. We got everything's planned out for 5 quarters going forward.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that, and that taking the time to breathe and listen. That's a good tip, because I think for a lot of people, when they're overwhelmed, that is the reaction. Doesn't matter what job you have, that is the reaction when you're overwhelmed, is to
Yeah.
just immediately say no, right? So that's a good one. Sorry, and last point you had there?
I don't know.
I think you
That's
had one more. You were no?
well, I mean, I would say those are, sort of tie them together, but it really is. I think the way to succeed, maybe it goes back to your question about growing in the function as well, working your way up the ladder, um, is being that trusted advisor. And this almost spans more back to business ops, right? RevOps, yes, for the revenue side, but we are technically interacting with every aspect of the business. So you want those leaders to come to you for advice, to run ideas by you, just have someone to, bounce things off of. And you gain that by doing all of the other things, right? By listening and entertaining their ideas and challenging them. And I think it all comes together. It's too easy for us to protect our area of the business and know that we can't take on more and just say no. But if we don't do that, we're now teaching, your head of product that we understand how our businesses work together. And it is important that we keep this dialogue going. And, the things I've discovered from having the counterparts in other areas of the business just proactively reach out to ask something have saved us so much pain and time, because we just had that dialogue. But that comes with, you got to gain their respect, but you also have to show them respect too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it all comes down to leadership at the end of the day, and you know, the way you're sort of trying to be collaborative has probably saved you a lot of heartache too, just by having that open ear listening, and these soft skills, right? That has taken a while to learn, maybe through certain things, right? So maybe that's the message as well for people, is like develop your soft skills, develop your patience. In ops, you need to develop your patience a bit and
You
so
got
on.
you need a lot of that. It is true. Like I could name off, technical skills and things, but I really think that the biggest struggles I've had in my career and the things I've had to learn how to navigate come back to those soft skills. And it sounds silly because I want to say just go get become a Salesforce certified admin. If you can't have conversations and challenge people and interact with not just peers, but the people above you and all of those things, it doesn't matter. if you're really good at a platform. And that goes back to absolutely every role.
Totally can appreciate that, and appreciate you for your time today with our call. It's been
Yeah,
great.
talk to you. Thank you. I could talk about ops all day.
I'm sure we could.